We're right in the middle of the great melt up. Regular inflation was already bad enough, but now it's supposedly ramping up and we're entering hyperinflation? How in the world are we supposed to survive this? Today, we'll go over what it is, as well as 4 strategies to mitigate it, and potentially even come out ahead. But first, huge shout out to Clear Value Tax. He's made several videos on this topic, and honestly, most of the information comes from him. But what is the Great Melt Up? Basically, the government's been spending way too much money, and our national debt has gone through the roof. Let's look at it right now. Exactly. We just gained like $200,000 worth of debt in 4 seconds. Even with our period of higher interest rates and quantitative tightening, inflation was still running rampant. But now we're going to lower the interest rates and enter a period of quantitative easing, and the cost of everything is going to skyrocket more than it already has. And on top of that, assets like stocks will rise in value, not so much due to its actual fundamentals, but more so just because of inflation and sentiment. The government has essentially gotten to a point of no return because there's only 2 options, and honestly, both of them are pretty bad. So let's think about option number 1. We can continue spending ridiculous amounts of money like we already have been. People don't feel it as much in their daily lives because this is honestly kind of the environment we're in right now. Everyone will still have their jobs, the stock market will continue to rise, but this will keep hyperinflation roaring. Seeing as this isn't really a solution and more so just kind of settling for what we've already been doing, what's the other option? Well, we can cut spending precipitously, but like I said earlier, this really isn't a good option either. If the government cuts spending in a way that's actually harsh enough to get anything done, then we're going to enter a deep recession. People will lose jobs, the stock market will plummet, assets like land and housing will plummet. This all might cause inflation to decelerate briefly, but not only would they not choose this route because honestly the majority of people that own most of the assets are just the extremely wealthy class, but also this scenario would just result in printing more money to bail out the nation again, which would in turn cause inflation to rise again. So basically we're trapped. Both bad choices lead to a bad outcome, or I'm sorry, both choices lead to a bad outcome, but it is possible to lessen the burden and get ahead of this. So before we get into some strategies, first let's think about this. The price of a house or groceries isn't going to triple overnight, all right? This whole situation is going to play out over several years, probably well into the 2030s, maybe even 2040s, 2050s. So we do have time to jump on board. It may be tough for a lot of people, but we have some time. But with that being said, the first thing that I think everyone should do is invest into hard assets. Real stuff that holds value. Stuff that people can't just hack into your account and steal from you, take away from you. The 2 biggest things that I would worry about are gold and real estate. I would prioritize gold over silver. The price of silver has been moving sideways for years, and honestly, gold is just more valuable. It's been the status of wealth since the dawn of time, and even now, when people have currency fears, what do? They flock to gold. They put all their money into gold, and you can see it even now. Over the past year, gold has been skyrocketing. I would also say try to save and buy some real gold. I know it's a good chunk of money, but you can go to Costco. Costco sells gold by the ounce. But if you didn't want to do that, you could also put your money into the GLD ETF. That is a possibility. It tracks the price of gold, but keep in mind this isn't gold. You don't actually own gold, so you don't have a good amount of that value. You just have an ETF that follows the price. And that's where I would say I definitely prefer owning real gold, even though, again, it's like $3,000 an ounce or something like that. But moving on. I know buying a house is hard as hell, and it's easier said than done, but this is one of the best investments you can make. First of all, I know this might sound ignorant, and I know owning a home isn't best for some people's situations, and I know there are people working their ass off to save money, saving money to buy a home, and in the meantime, they have to rent. But in my mind, renting a house or an apartment is just like setting money on fire. It's literally going nowhere except into the pocket of your landlord. But There is one method that you could use to potentially make yourself a lot of money, or at the very least save yourself a lot of money when it comes to buying a house. And that method is buying foreclosures. Look, I know it might sound a little bit slimy, but honestly, you got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of yourself in life, right? And they weren't filling out their contractual duties anyway, so something has to be done. But look, I know the thought of living in a foreclosure might sound scary. All it means is someone wasn't making their payments. Now, of course, there are some foreclosed houses that might require a lot of maintenance, so do your due diligence, take on what you can handle. But honestly, you could use that as a bargaining chip to try to save yourself even more money. Also, most homes need some type of repair anyway. Most homes have something going wrong all the time, even new ones, and it's really just like buying a car. You buy a new car with all the bells and whistles, there's always something going wrong. And I really can't think of anything that has more bells and whistles than a house. But it's a necessity, and it's also a great tangible investment. The next strategy that everyone should be doing is, if you couldn't already tell, buying stocks. Obviously, investing in the stock market in general is a good idea, especially to fight against inflation. But specifically, there are two great routes that you can go. You can focus on companies with great pricing power that can continue to raise their prices and people will continue to buy from them. And honestly, the first stock that comes to my mind is FICO. Now, Joseph Carlson highlighted this in one of his videos. I have no idea which one, but FICO scores are extremely affordable, especially whenever you're comparing it to all the other costs of buying a home. People don't even notice the FICO score. I think it's like $5 or something like that. I briefly looked into it. But not only does everyone need it when they buy a house, but it's so cheap they could probably raise their prices by 100% for several years and literally no one would bat an eye. Another great investing strategy for fighting against inflation is buying dividend growth stocks. There's so many reasons that I'm a dividend growth investor, but not only do dividend growth stocks tend to outperform, but the inflation rate is 2.7% right now, okay? It could rise 400% tomorrow to 10.8%, and I would still have companies growing their dividends faster. Let's take Lowe's, for example. They've averaged 12.8% dividend growth every single year for the past 3 years and 17.4% dividend growth over the past 10 years. If I continue to invest into companies that grow faster than inflation, I will literally never get swept under. The third thing you should do is minimize your cash. Outside of an emergency fund, you really don't need much cash unless maybe you're saving for something, but even then, you could just dollar cost average into an index fund and probably get to your goal even faster. But cash loses value literally every single day. Even if we weren't in this quote unquote everything bubble, I would still try to minimize my cash. Just set up a high yield savings account and put your emergency fund in there and forget about saving cash. This isn't even taking into account the time value of money. That was for you, Braden. That might be a new meme for the channel. But anyways, back to high yield savings accounts. The inflation rate right now is 2.7%. A Capital One high yield savings account right now pays 3.5%. If there's nothing else you take from this video, just please set up a high yield savings account. There's no reason anyone shouldn't have their money in one, and it's all FDIC insured. Lastly, I know this gets repeated and regurgitated, and you're probably tired of hearing this from every single finance YouTuber, but find some way of increasing your income. I know you can't just snap your fingers and double your salary, but as dumb as it sounds, increasing your income is the most efficient way of making money. And to explain this to you, I'm pulling some numbers out of thin air. These aren't real metrics, but let's just say it costs you like $5 worth of gas to mow someone's lawn, right? You can charge them $40 and get an 800% return. The S&P isn't doing that. If you mow one lawn a week, that's an extra $140 a month after gas expenses. You can invest that. Or maybe you can use it to save for gold or something. But an extra $140 a month is not something you should overlook. But anyways, that kind of wraps up this video. I apologize for taking so long. It's almost been like 2 weeks since my last video. But we got big things coming. Anyways, I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, maybe consider subscribing, maybe consider leaving a comment. I'd really appreciate it. But good luck on your investing journey.